If you provide business-to-business technology services such as an MSP, vCISO, cybersecurity, or similar, then I'm going to be showing you how one simple tweak to your sales deck will dramatically improve your closing rate. And stick with me here because if you are still selling IT services, hardware, or software, then that is a complete waste of time. And I know that sounds crazy, but once you understand these concepts, you will see just why that is. And be sure to stick around till the end of the video because there is a secret downloadable bonus you can get just for sticking around that you're going to want to implement into your business after understanding these concepts. Now let's dive right into it. What we really want to do with our sales deck is get predictable, easier, faster sales. We want to be able to grow our revenue, and ultimately we want to be different than our competitors. We don't want to sound like every other IT technology company, anything like that. And this is exactly what we're going to be focusing on, because the ultimate sales metric for somebody who is providing technology services or is an MSP, which moving forward, that's the terminology we're going to use, even though this applies to any technology service provider. But the ultimate sales metric or success metric for your sales is, can you get a buyer or a prospect to go through the sales journey every single time and increase the odds of them buying? Basically, can you get a stranger to go from understanding what your stuff is to actually buying it? And there are 3 stages that everybody goes through in a buyer's journey. It doesn't matter if you're selling technology. It doesn't matter if you're selling really a bag of coffee or if you're selling a car. This really applies to anything, but most importantly, this applies to technology providers because there's so much education on the front end. Now, there are 3 stages: cold, warm, and hot. Cold is where they're going to say, hey, what is this thing and why does it matter? They need education at that point. The second thing is a warm prospect, which is you're just squashing objections. You're myth busting. Like, hey, how does it work for me? I'm different. I'm special. I'm unique. How long does it take? What does it look like? Why does it matter? Is there downtime? What sacrifice? All the what if questions they typically ask you. And then the last one is where the majority of technology service providers live, which is the prospect stage of a hot prospect. And that's the how can I take the next step? But the problem is either A, you don't have a compelling offer at that stage, or B, you're kind of just competing against somebody who's already got something similar. And what happens is a lot of times technology providers will say things like, oh, we found it really beneficial to go to a business with an in-house IT team and try and sell our services. The problem is that's only about 10 to 20% of the total market, and you have to have a super, super good reason for them to transition, meaning that, yeah, you might be cheaper, but it's never a benefit to be cheaper than the competition. You want to be the most expensive option, ideally. Or B, there's going to be a disruption to the status quo, and there needs to be some gain in the long run that most business owners that you're selling to or selling your IT or your cybersecurity or whatever your tech solution is, they need to realize that, yes, if you are offboarding your old team and onboarding our team in that delay, sure, they lose, let's say, 10% productivity. Well, that also means after you're done, you need to get 20 to 30% productivity gains, i.e., you need to be better than what they were doing before for this to even matter. It doesn't matter how cheap you are, because if there's a loss on the back end for something that they're losing out on something as a business, it's moot. So the problem is most MSPs are basically just stuck at the hot stage, and the other 80% of the market is where you want to be, because likely, and if you're already at this stage, you understand your actual ideal client's profile's needs. If you don't, that means you probably don't have a niche, and technology is not a niche, and working with small business owners is not a niche. If you don't have a niche, there is a link to in the description on how to actually find one as an MSP. You need that for this to work. Otherwise, you're never going to be able to grow your business without a clearly defined target. But again, your cold prospect probably has a problem that you can solve because you've done the market research or because you've interacted with enough people in their industry to understand their common problems. All you need to do is to do this whole process in record time, and that is what the sole purpose of your sales deck is. Educate them, squash those objections, open with a compelling offer at the very end. That's it. Now, here's what that looks like. The very beginning, and this is the first thing they see, is your intro slide. And I'm going to tell you right now, one of the first things that you're probably thinking is design-wise, it doesn't really matter. You could honestly get away with having an all-white presentation and just black text. The more compelling the story, the more compelling the journey is. Really, you don't need to leverage very crazy designs. Again, I would recommend probably putting some brand accent colors in there if at all possible. Put some blues in there if you have blue in your logo. Put some red in there if you have some red in your logo. But really, the text and the journey is what matters most. Now, let's dive into this. The first thing is our hook. You'll see over here, right there, is what we're going to focus on. I'm not doing a good job of pointing at it, but the formula we typically recommend is how we get the big outcome for the target, the person we're in the industry or whoever we're trying to work with in a particular time frame without some form of risk. An example might be, how we retrieve 10 to 15K in lost revenue for a manufacturer in San Diego County, for manufacturers in San Diego County in 30 days without having to change how they work. Then you could say something like, okay, well, we're doing a license audit. You have all these old legacy machines. You still have a Windows 7 machine that's linked up to this big CNC. That's costing you time. You have like 50 licenses that you're paying for that you're not doing anything with. You have like duplicate Office 365 licenses. Again, that's what's going on in your head, but they don't understand that. They just want to know how they can get that money back. So way down the line in the presentation, you'll talk about your IT services and a little bit about your technology aspects. But for now, big outcome. Big outcome. Your outcome is all that matters. You're selling the result. And then again, I would recommend adding a sub tagline for, stop struggling with this pain that you're going through and get the benefit. So if the benefit is going to be adjacent to those outcomes. So if it is revenue, then likely that's probably meaning that they're losing downtime. If that money could be better spent on a new employee, if that could be spent on better hardware. Don't talk about the actual feature set, but talk about what you're going to get as a result later down the line. So that means you're going to spend less time being a part-time IT person and working in the business. You're going to have more time working on the business, which means you're going to be able to grow it, which means you're going to be able to increase your revenue. Those are benefits that come as a result of the features that you implement. So the next thing we're going to dive into is what we want to actually understand is this is called the empathize stage. At this point, realistically, these images as well, you would want to replace these right here. Replace them with your ideal customer or ideal client profile. Don't just pull up a generic stock image. Make it look like the people. So if you're working with manufacturers, put a manufacturer there. If you're working with dentists, put a dentist there. But again, this empathize stage, what we want to do is a few key things. 3 things need to happen at this point. Number 1, we want a little bit of backstory to make it seem like you're credible, you're authoritative, that you decided to fix this thing because you saw a need in the market. Not because you were like, yeah, I love technology. We're the number 1 whatever consultant. We're the number 1 technology. They don't care about any of that. They don't care about your team. They care about why you solve this thing, what solving it looks like, why you're going to help them get to where they want to be. That's really the truth of it. So number 1, a little one-liner about why you created this thing. Hey, we saw everybody in this industry was struggling with these problems. That's why we did it. Skip the credentials, skip all of that. They don't care at this stage. The second thing you want to do is to build what's called a sacrificial scarecrow. And what we're doing is you can never tell the prospect that they're wrong or that they're doing anything wrong. Nobody wants to be told that they're bad at something, that they're making mistakes, that they're making the wrong decisions. So then you want to paint a picture of saying like, hey, this may not apply to you, but the reason that we did this is because we saw people in this industry going through these issues or going through these obstacles. And then the third thing is we want to do what's called mirroring, because they will then admit their own faults in the language that you want to understand. And we're going to take that little snippet and use it to our advantage. So for an example of this, it might be like, hey, we started the patient protection system for dental practices because we realized, they kept falling into these 3 traps. Well, number 1, they were worrying about HIPAA compliance, which meant that they're thinking about how much money am I going to lose, which might lead to tens of thousands of dollars if they have a data breach, because every patient record is $450. That's an outline of, hey, we get you, we understand this is why we built it this way. And then ultimately, what you're going to do is at the very end, after you've painted this picture, again, we're painting this picture of why we made this thing. The second thing is afterwards, We're going to talk about our sacrificial scarecrow, which is we don't say you're doing these things. We're saying people in the industry are doing these things. And then last but not least, hold up the mirror and say, hey, do any of these apply to you? And if you've done your market research, if you've done your homework, then they'll likely say at least one of them applies to their business. If it's bang on with the most common things, they'll say, yeah, all of these apply to me. But you want to address those up front, and you want them to say it in the language that makes sense, which is like, oh wait, yeah, we're not HIPAA compliant. I've actually been thinking about this, and I don't think we are, and I'd really like to be because it's stressing us out, and I really don't want to have to worry about losing all this money, which could cost me my entire business. And then now you're like, that is the pain point that you can latch on to then feed into the future slides. So recap. One line in your story about why you built this thing. Build your sacrificial scarecrow. Don't tell them they're wrong, but say that other people in their industry are wrong. And then 3, hold up that mirror and say, do any of these apply to you? Take note of what they say, and then make sure you write that down in your presentation notes so that you can use it later. Next thing we want to do here is what is called our painting our dream state. Because at this stage, we want to basically get to the point where we understand where they're at, but more importantly, we want to know where really they want to be. The easiest way to think about this is you are the journeyman. If we want to use a nerdy example, you are Yoda and they are Luke Skywalker. Your goal is not to sell them on features. Your goal is to tell them, we get where you're at. We understand where you want to be. Here's how we can get you to there. Paint that picture. So you're getting real here, and you're basically painting 2.0 picture of what they actually want. So let's say like we're that dental practice again. Hey, we notice you're getting a lot of patients. The community really likes you. You have great 5-star reviews on Google, but you don't have an online booking system and your receptionist can only take on one call at a time. Wouldn't it be great if patients could book 24/7, 365 from any of their devices? That would mean more patients, more business, more time for you and your receptionist to focus on growth, to actually focus on what you want to do. Imagine how great and simple that would be. They'd get SMS reminders, they would get email reminders, and we'll set it all up with an ERP that's HIPAA compliant. Then they'd be like, wow, like, oh my goodness, like I absolutely want that. I would love more patients and I would love less work. And that would be a fantastic thing for you to pitch if you were targeting a dental clinic. Same thing here. Positive state they're at, but we could be at version 2 of that future state. Now to recap, we're painting a picture here of where they want to be. If you've done your market research, then ultimately you should understand really where they want to be, but we're focusing on the better future state, that dreamlike state at the very end of this. If we want to use like a big analogy for just more of a broad state, you're not selling them a ticket to Las Vegas because they are going to look at that and think, yeah, I got to go through TSA, sit in a crusty airport, get crammed into a seat. You're selling them the destination of, well, it's great that you're taking a vacation, but imagine you're at that roulette table and you're putting it all on black and you're at the buffet and you're walking up and down the strip. That's what you're selling them, the aftermath. So start to understand where they want to be in their journey and put that right back in their face. Now we want to break their belief system. This is the part where they say like, yeah, I mean, I guess that makes a lot of sense, but what if? Well, this is where you start to think about the common objections that they would always have, or at least some of the big ones. This common belief actually holds you back from dream outcome. And this is really where we come back to our sacrificial scarecrow, which is like, what do they say in their head as to why this thing won't work for them? What is something that they hold on to, which is like, I don't think I have an IT problem. I just want more money. Well, actually, your duplicate Office 365 licenses, or the fact that you don't know what you're paying for right now, I would probably put it in more broad terms. The fact that you cannot keep track of where your hardware is going, where your software is going, actually costs you a lot of money, which prevents your business from growing. So this is where, again, we want to break down those layers of just beliefs that they're holding in their head. They're probably at this stage saying like, hey, I get this. And the conversation in their head is going to be like, but I don't think it applies to me. So that's when you want to start to address those head on. And if none of these are applicable, that means that you probably haven't done enough research to better understand what your client's needs are or your prospects' needs are. So if none of these are making sense to them, then that means you need to go back to the drawing board. If at least one of these is making sense, then again, you can always mirror it back to them. Like, say, does this make sense to them? Does that make sense? Do any of these apply? You want to think about it like a preacher would. Can I get an amen? You want them to say yes at the point of that, so their belief system is latched onto what you're providing them in this state. So that's why not only do you want to break those beliefs, but you need to understand that they should believe the new terminology, the new meta that you're presenting to them right now. Because if they don't, then they're just going to say like, yeah, I don't really get it. It doesn't make sense, like whatever. And that's why you might not be able to close the sale. So to recap, what are your common objections, common beliefs, common things that they think in their head that really are the cause of the problem that you can put right here? That you can say like, hey, you might not think that having backups matters for your dental practice, but if you do not have data backups and you have a breach and that costs you thousands of dollars, then you might not be able to open that second brick and mortar. In fact, you might go out of business. Just like that, list all of those common beliefs and the things that prevent them to get there. This is that little bridge that they're not quite connecting the dots, saying like, yeah, I don't really understand how A relates to B, until you help them understand it. So next thing we want to understand here is this is the part where we want to quantify this. We want to actually say like, hey, if this keeps happening, what is also going to happen? If you don't solve this now, here's what's going to happen if you don't fix this. That bad feature, now you can start to bring in some of those features, will actually result in bad outcome, which means bad results. That non-HIPAA compliance will mean that unfortunately you're susceptible to a breach, you're susceptible to non-compliance, which means that you could get huge, lengthy legal fees. Minuses, minuses, minuses. This is where you're like, hey, not only are now we talking about these things that this affects you, but how this affects the business as a whole and over a longer period of time. So again, it might not be that your technology problem solves this today, in a week, in a month, but the reality is if they keep waiting, if they have a bleeding neck problem, if it's just hurting them to not solve this, you also need to paint the reverse picture, which is like, all right, do you realize that in a year from now, this is probably what's going to happen? So we want to do this as much as possible, not to just kind of scare them, but to really get them to understand both ways in the connecting the dots. Like, not only do we want to focus on the positive aspects, but we also want to say like, hey, it sounds like based on the big pain point that you had earlier in slide 2, where you said like, oh, we don't have that this is what the result of that is going to be. This is where you could start to use what they say as ammo, which is like, hey, we are experiencing this pain. Well, that pain is now adjacent to this bad feature, which results in bad outcome, which brings bad outcome, which brings bad result. And we want them to get to the point where they understand like, oh, shoot, I never thought about it this way, but that makes a lot of sense. I do need to fix this. If I don't fix this, then, well, what's that bad outcome and that bad result? And again, result is going to be the big quantifiable sticker shock you can put on it. If you can say like, hey, this is going to cost you 10 to 15K every month if you don't fix this, then that's really your results. Your outcome is more so going to be, hey, this is going to cost you time and money. So again, recap. Bad feature brings bad outcome, which means bad result. We want to paint a picture of going both ways, not just what they're going to gain through this journey, but ultimately what is the big scary thing that they're avoiding? What's the monster in the closet that if they don't address this now, it's just going to keep getting worse? It's a very common tactic, and you need to employ this for them to understand why this even matters. So this is the transformation. In your story arc, this is what is called the pivotal moment in the hero's journey, where suddenly it's like, wait a minute, all this bad stuff, all this good stuff, now I'm kind of getting it. What if there was a third way? What if there was another reality? This is where we demystify our process. So we want to say in just time to value, so in just 30 days, if you wanted to get that result, we would do it in 3 easy steps. 3 is ideal if you need to break it down into 5, but 3 makes it seem achievable. Well, this is the part where you could start to actually implement your specific tech offerings. So feature gets the business this benefit. So having data redundancy, or let's say like, I don't know, doing a license audit or doing a pen test, gets the business what? Talk about what it gets them in the language that you used earlier, or something that your ideal client profile would value. And at the end of the day, what we're trying to do here is to make this seem achievable. And this is why I see all these huge diagrams and presentations of like, yeah, we're going to install this and do that and do this. And here's a 5-piece table of all the stuff we're going to do. That makes it seem really lengthy. That makes it seem like work. That makes it seem like a huge, difficult process to go through this. Just break it down, boil it down. Step 1, we're going to do this, which is going to get you that. Step 2, we're going to do this, which is going to get you that. Step 3, we're going to do this, which gets you that. And all of this is going to happen within X amount of time. And overall, these are the benefits you're going to get through your business. Because it sounds like, and then you can use the pain from before, and you could say, it sounds like you're struggling with, it sounds like you want, and then you could implement these into that stage as well. It sounds like you don't want to have to deal with tech headaches. It sounds like you don't want to have to worry about HIPAA compliance. It sounds like you would rather just have a lot of this be automated so that ultimately you could grow your business, open up a second brick and mortar location, and earn more revenue and have more free time to focus on family, friends, whatever it is they want. Here's how we're going to do exactly that. Now, to recap, the demystification stage is very important because you're painting an achievable picture of what it is you're doing. This is how you begin to start to close your hero's loop. Yoda is going to take him and train him in the swamps of Dagobah and teach him the ways of the Force and actually get him to challenge the dark side, and then he'll be a master Jedi. Same thing in here. And reality is what happens a lot of the times if you don't do this. To use another nerdy analogy, if you watch Star Trek and you know when Captain Picard goes over and he talks to Geordi LaForge and he says like, hey, why are the dilithium chambers decoupled from the matrix magnifold, which is blah, 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 blah. That's what a lot of times happens when a lot of tech providers try to explain what they do. It's just technobabble to them. Boil it down into 3 easy to understand, easy to seemingly follow steps, and you will be surprised at how much more receptive people are. So to recap, make it easy, make it fast, make it so compelling that they would say, wow, I want that, and it only takes this. Then what we want to do is the next thing. Recap and reflect. So again, this is where you can use a lot of that ammo again, which is, hey, after all this ends up happening, you're going to get business outcome 1 without even having to deal with risk reversal, or without even having to deal with risk. So you're going to get increased time without having to have a bigger workload. Business outcome 2 with another risk reversal. You're going to get more you're going to get more revenue without having to buy anything new or without having to change your daily operating habits. This is realistically where you want to start to talk about the more business-centric outcomes. In this case, what we're looking for is ultimately how we can say like, you're going to get this even without that. This is your this and that. You're compiling everything we just kind of talked about and overarching the business outcomes without having to have any sort of like big ask from them. And you want to think about the big common things that they would basically be struggling with or concerned about during this stage. So if you say like something along the lines of, let's say I sold weight loss and say, hey, we're going to help you lose those 10 pounds in 30 days and you can eat meals that actually taste good so that you don't have to worry about even what to cook or something that tastes terrible. You know, that's a big concern if I'm selling weight loss where they're like, yeah, I'm going to have to go on this diet. I'm going to take all these healthy meals that taste terrible. That's when you would start to say, oh, you're going to get this without that. So in technology sense, you're going to say like, hey, you're going to get business outcome without this big ask of you. Now to recap, we want to basically reflect everything we just talked about up until this point, reuse it, just shoot it straight back at them in a way that makes sense, and to basically boil it down into 3 really high compelling benefits and outcomes that they can expect. And we want to start to talk about our risk reversal elements in here as well. Again, this is just stuff that they're avoiding in their head that's going to say like, yeah, but I don't think this is going to work for me, or I'm going to have to deal with that, which is like, hey, you're going to get thing without thing. That's it. Boil it down into as simple terms as possible. Now, the next stage we want to approach here is the what if kickers. This is the best part for you to start squashing those objections. They should be primarily educated at this point, and this is the part where it's going to say like, yeah, you've probably heard very similar things before. List the myths, how we solve this. Well, this is kind of your pseudo FAQ section. So if they're going to ask you very common questions at the end of the presentation or all the things that realistically the prospects ask, this is your chance to put like those top 3, maybe even top 5 in there, where it's like, well, okay, what if, what if we're not capable of doing this? What if we don't have this? What if we don't have that thing? Well, actually, we do that on your behalf. We do have this thing and we do this. So at this point, just a short recap, because this one isn't really that complex to understand. Just literally take the objections, the top 5 to 10 questions that everybody asks you whenever you sell your thing, list out the top 3 to 5 of those, put them into a slide deck here, and literally say, here's how we're going to solve it and why that matters. That way, it seems like you know what you're talking about because you've already addressed them up front. It's always better to talk about these at the very now, because A, you can plan what your terminology is going to be so it lands more efficiently, and B, because it looks like you know what you've done. It looks like you've done this before, which presents this as a more compelling, less risky, more higher value option. Now, this is the one that I really like to add into here because I feel like it's very easy. All you have to do is just 2 things in your slides. Would you rather, and you want to ask them this right after you present this, would you rather deal with big expense or big pain? This thing costs you some amount of money or painful outcome? Or would you rather, and then list out everything that they're going to get in your actual service, what that would normally be worth in the market? So let's say you're going to get a full-time technician on a 24/7 support crisis hotline. That would probably cost you a few thousand a month. And list it out, just step by step, everything, your NAS, your servers, your antivirus, your quarterly cybersecurity review, everything, and attach a value to it. And then say, normally, add all those prices together and say, normally, it would be big price, but you'd be getting this all for only less than the price and the big price and the expense. So at this stage, what you're going to talk about is you want to put this down like on a percentage basis as a comparison of the big expense. So over here, when you have your big expense, let's say it's like, yeah, if you get a HIPAA fine, it's $10,000 to $20,000. But in our case, you'd be getting about $30,000 to $40,000 worth of labor value. You'd be getting all of this for 25% of what a HIPAA violation is. So you want to anchor this big, horrible outcome and position your thing on the other side as like, well, would you rather spend all this money and deal with all this hassle over here? Or for just a fraction of that, which you'd get all of this crazy value at the bottom, you'd be getting ABC, 1, 2, 3, all of these listed out. And then ask them like, hey, would you rather get the thing that's not fun, that costs you a lot of time, that costs you a lot of headache, or for a fraction of that, would you rather get all of this? And they're going to say something like, of course, I'd rather get the big thing. But again, you want to do that. It's very important. It's a psychology thing because you just want to say, perfect. It sounds like we're in agreement then. And then instantly you can transition to the next slide and say, well, actually, you can get all of this, your offer name, whatever you've branded it as, which don't just say IT services, don't say visas, or don't say cybersecurity, call it something relevant to the business or the industry you're targeting in just time frame, which gives you dream outcome. We actually have our Patient Protect system, which in just 30 days gives you a complete IT solution. And, normally for this actual price, for only actual price, which would normally be big price. So to be clear, if you're offering $10,000 worth of value for all the things that they would get if they were to buy them or hire those people in comparable market value individually, they're getting it all for your actual price, which would normally be the big price. And this is a process which is normally called value stacking or price anchoring. So if I were to say like, yeah, we're going to redo your marketing strategy. You're going to get a marketing guy, you're going to get an SEO guy, you're going to get a CMO, you're going to get a meta ads expert, you're going to get a videographer, and each one of those all combined would cost you about $10,000 a month. Well, for us, we're actually only going to be doing it for $2,000 a month because now they look at big number and say, oh, I get big outcome and I get big value for little price. So they comparatively create that in their head and say, wow, that seems like a great deal. You're going to say, we do step 1, we do step 2, we do step 3. And then at the very end, you're going to use what we always love to call our jokingly reverse Uno card and say, plus our big guarantee that you're going to get this thing, or big reverse risk reversal. It's recommended to have a guarantee if you don't have one. At this point, it's just something that you really want them to feel solid in their decision making. So plus, if in 30 days you're not satisfied with the results, we'll give you a $1,000 check just for wasting your time, and we'll even find you a new IT team. So then you can open up the door if you want to. If you want to be a little less, hey, punching up above your weight class within a guarantee, you can do a risk reversal, which is just like, hey, this offer only lasts for the next 5 people, and we selected you specifically, and we normally whatever risk reversal, whatever big thing that they're haunting over them, that they're not making the decision. But again, a guarantee is always best. Big risk reversal is kind of the step down from that, but an example of that would be like, hey, instead of saying in 30 days we'll give you a refund, you might say like something along the lines of, we're only going to do this for you. We're only going to do, and not only that, we're going to give you a few bonuses, or hey, we're going to make sure we do it right. We have a 100% satisfaction guarantee. It's softer, but it does make them feel like they're a little bit more taken care of, so to speak. But guarantees are always best. And this is really where you paint your big offer, because again, to recap what we've just done overall, we've educated them. They understand what this thing is. We've gotten them to the objection stage where they say, hey, you can avoid ABC 1, 2, 3. This is how we handle all these different 1, 2, 3 things for you. And now we're finally at the hot offer stage, which is like, great, I want this. This sounds awesome. What do I need to do next? This is where you want to paint your compelling offer. If you have other things as well that you can add on to here, it's always best to include them. If you have something that makes this more enticing, more value-driven, make sure to compel this. But this is the basic structure of a compelling offer. And then finally, last thing you want to do, just to kind of do your mic drop a social proof page at the end, which is like, hey, I know this sounds compelling. Just to prove that it works, here's our Google reviews, our clutch reviews, some testimonials, or big outcomes that we've created. Put them in a huge, big wall screenshot, or your big case study of like, this is like 50 people that we got this huge result for. This is our 5-star rating that we have on Google. And this is the part where realistically, even if it's just a basic screenshot from somewhere, if you can just put a bunch of proof that you've done this thing, this is where you want to land on this to kind of just do your final like, yep, it's that easy. So to recap, what we've done so far here is to basically build out a complete end-to-end system that would educate, calm those objections, and ultimately get them to convert. And it's recommended that if they're ready to go, I see no reason, if you have a compelling offer and sales deck, that you should be able to close them on the call. At this stage, what I would recommend at the very end is to say, I know that was a lot of information, or hey, I know this was a lot to touch base with. What are your primary questions, and what would prevent you from moving forward with this today? And they're going to probably say like, and if you've done everything right, you've probably answered all their questions. How long? Why? What does it look like? What's expected of them? All of that would have been addressed up front, so they would probably have very little, if any, questions. And that is the metric for success right there, is because that's how you've basically gotten them to the point where it's like, well, it sounds like there really aren't any objections. It sounds like you do want the result, because remember, we talked about in the first slide, you don't want to have to deal with A, B, C, and you would really like 1, 2, 3, and our program solves that in X amount of time using process. Well, here's how we can get started. And then you can open the door to sending them your proposal, or ideally you could take a credit card over the presentation and save that payment method on file and charge them for the big thing, get their digital signature, whatever you need to do to close the sale. Now, if all of this is like really confusing as well, one thing I do want to say is, if you're still struggling to grow your MSP and you just really don't have leads, or you don't know how to close sales, or you don't really have a predictable pipeline to actually increase your revenue, then all you need to do is to click on this link in the description or the pinned comment. You can get a free lead gen system, and this is the bonus as well. This is a plug and play Canva template. All you literally need to do is just make a copy in your account, fill in the blanks Mad Lib style, and you have a high converting pitch deck. So head over to iwantmspleads.com, go ahead and implement all of these little fill in the blank steps here and get a lead gen system while you're at it as well for your business that teaches you how to get people interested in your stuff, close more sales, and build a machine that actually gets them into your pipeline, and ultimately how to do that in as little as 30 days for free. So I put out a video like this as well every single week for MSPs and business owners. Be sure to subscribe. There's more content coming, and make sure you comment below if there's anything that you're struggling with. I want to make content without having to do guesswork to help you grow your business. But that's all I have for you today. Until then, I'll see you next time.